Hey, it's Chris. In my last video, I told you what I thought the iPad Pro was still lacking and what I'd like to see come to the lineup. Today, I'm going to go through some of the comments. I asked you guys what you wanted to see in the next iPad Pro, and you had some really interesting answers. There was some overlap, but there was some new stuff that I missed also, and I want to give you my reaction to everything that you had to say. Let's start with some of the convergence first, because I think it's really interesting to look at the intersection of where some of the things that somebody who, yeah, loves the iPad Pro from a personal perspective, but also treats it on more of a professional level too, as kind of part of their job, like a reviewer, where I think the iPad should head, and where you, as a pure consumer who really just love it for what it is or what it could be, where do we intersect in terms of where we want this to go? The first trend that I spotted was really more robust apps. This seems to be something that everybody really wants to see come to the iPad Pro. And I think that says more about the iPad Pro than people realize. People love the device for what it is, and they just want the apps to come and to catch up. What people don't seem to be saying is, hey, we love these apps and we'd like to use them in different places. They want to use these more full-featured apps on the iPad Pro. Another thing that people really seem to be looking for, and this is something that I mentioned too, was some Apple Pencil enhancements. Now, that could look like different things. I'm not going to speculate as to what Apple has in the hopper here, but it's important to note that that's what I want, that's what you want, and that seems to be something that we might actually get because the rumors have been pointing at some new Apple Pencil features. Also, I'm not the only person who seems to want more connectivity options. Just some extra ports. You know, we have one port on the iPad itself, at least give us two. That seems to be something that is echoed time and again in the comments. The mentality seems to be, hey, you've labeled this the iPad Pro. This isn't the Air, this isn't the budget entry-level iPad. There needs to be more options for heavier duty workflows, for input, output, connectivity to accessories, etc. That seems to be a recurring theme. Something else that everybody wants, this is not a surprise, is multi-user profiles. I mentioned this, you're mentioning this. Everybody wants multiple people to be able to use an iPad and use it how they want with their apps, their setup, their home screen, their widgets, just by logging in. We have this on the Mac. That's one thing that does need to come over from the Mac. Not in a Mac like way, do it in the iPad way, but give us multiple user profiles. Which kind of leads into something else that is heavily requested. The iPad is like wide open in terms of what could be thought up, developed, how it can be used, because it's such a Swiss Army knife of a device. It's already very Transformer-like. You can turn it into something that fits just about any situation. But I know, as somebody who covers the iPad Pro so often, that when I make an accessories video, that becomes super popular super quickly because people want to do more with their iPad Pro. They're always looking for ways. So whether that comes from Apple or Apple allows for some new ways for accessory makers to enhance the iPad Pro, people want more accessories. Now, I did bring up Freeform very briefly in the last one, talking about I wish that it had some more robust features, like you could do bullet point lists with shortcuts like you can in Apple Notes. Somebody else brought up that they wished that Freeform got a few updates as well. Specifically, they wished that there was a way to have templates within Freeform, and I think that's an excellent idea. In fact, I talked about templates and how to make your own in one of my previous Freeform videos. If you also love Freeform and you want to go way deeper into this amazing app, check out my new course. It's up for pre-sale right now for 50% off until it launches. It's called Freeform Unleash. It's going to help you get so much more out of this app, go way beyond the basics, getting it to do more than it was ever designed to do. Freeform Unleash, it's linked up down below, 50% off for a limited time. And the final point of overlap between my last video and your comments is that people really do want different iPad Pro sizes. Whether that's smaller or bigger, most people seem to kind of sway towards the bigger side of things, and I get that. It's like digital real estate. People want more canvas to sketch, to draw, if you're an artist, you know. But I do think that there's plenty of people out there that are like me that would like to see the iPad Pro kind of move into the opposite direction. A smaller version, something like the iPad Mini Pro. There's a market. Now, let's get into some of the things that I did not cover in my version of this video, the things I thought the iPad Pro was lacking. And some of these I'm going to agree with, some of them I'm not. Here's a big one. And I think I may have mentioned this before, but I did not mention it in the last video. So I'm glad that some people brought this up. And that is the addition of an SD slot for the iPad Pro. This makes all the difference in the world. You can go out and you can buy some accessories that are nice accessories. They're like ports or hubs that plug in to the one available port that we have right now. and do give you something like an SD card slot or a mini SD slot. And that makes it a little bit easier to transfer and work with large files. Yes, but it would be nice if that was just built in. It's one of my favorite things about a MacBook Pro is that I don't have to have some separate extra dongle for messing with files. And I can just go straight from camera right into this device where I'm going to do some editing, especially when you're mobile. You don't want hubs and ports and cables and dongles. You just want everything built in there if you can. Here's something I super disagree with though. And I saw a lot of comments, and I have seen a lot of comments like this for years, and it's okay, we can disagree on this, but a lot of people want to see Mac OS just come to the iPad, port it over, and turn the iPad into something that's more like a Windows style everything device. It's part tablet, it's part computer, and I see why someone might want to have that happen, but I take the opposite approach. I really want the iPad to be the iPad. I want it to have its own personality and uses, and I don't want it to be the everything device, because when you specialize, then you can have some certain unique features that you can really lean into, versus when you try to be everything to everyone, then you really water down some of the things that make the iPad Pro in this form factor special. And I'll just say what I've been saying for years, there's no reason for Apple to actually merge the two devices like I think a lot of people want, because you already have a Mac. If you just want a Mac, that already exists. Now, it's not a touchscreen Mac, and I get that. I just said this the other day. I don't like it when people put fingerprints all over my Mac screen when I hand it off to them and they're like a Windows user and they fingerprint it up because they don't understand it's not a touchscreen because they're used to Windows and Android and stuff. There's a separate use case for that. Like, if you want that, there is alternatives for you. One thing that I didn't mention, and this probably is just stemming from the fact that I don't do like any programming, is that people want a more robust development environment on the iPad Pro. Now, you can do some light stuff, you can do some workaround stuff, but people want full-fledged development capabilities for the iPad Pro. Like what? Well, obviously full Xcode, talking about full-featured apps, that's one thing, but also just the ability to run web servers locally. One thing that I do agree with is a desktop class browser. Now, I mentioned that when it comes to browsing, and when I did my iPad Pro versus MacBook video recently, I said browsing, for heavy duty browsing, like multitasking browsing, not just convenience browsing, I go with the Mac because I can use something like Arc, which is super full featured and powerful and really doesn't have a counterpart over on the iPad. So I 100% get this. I did talk about plugins, and I think that is something that people really want to see come to the iPad as well, because certain workflows, you get used to something and it's more powerful, and then you come to the iPad and it's just like, I can't do that here, or I can't do it as quickly or easily. Now, one thing that I sort of almost hinted at, but I didn't actually get into, was wireless charging. Now, this is something that's rumored to be coming. It's not something that I've ever sat there and been like, I need wireless charging because that would make my life so much better. Those were really the major things, I think. Now, isn't that interesting? This isn't some super huge long list. There's a few, I would call, big items, major items that people are still after. And I want to point out that this list is constantly shrinking. Now, we're looking at the time frame of years, but it used to be that people really complained about multitasking. I'm not really hearing that a lot anymore. Some people might say it's not quite what they wanted, and the way that usually goes is, well, I just like it better on the Mac, so just give us the Mac OS experience. Okay, we just talked about that. But also, external monitor support. That was a really big, huge deal up until pretty recently, and then Apple brought that. And now you can have a whole desk setup anchored by nothing but your iPad Pro and have a really full-featured external monitor experience. And again, people are going to be like, the people that do complain are going to be like, well, I just like the Mac way of doing things better, so give us Mac OS. So we've really reached a point, though, where a lot of the major things, even Pro apps, we're starting to see those trickle in. A lot of the stuff, you want it to get fixed overnight, but it takes years of development for things to actually happen. Because it's not always just Apple, it's also like developers too, and the decisions that they make about what platforms they're going to support and how. Which brings up one other reaction, and I have hinted at this before, but if you've been a Mac first user your whole life, and then the iPad comes along and it does things differently, that's going to feel really foreign to you. But for those of you, and there are a lot of people, and it's hard for some of the Mac people to realize this, that have been iPad first. It doesn't have to be the iPad Pro, but just iPad first. That's how you kind of learned computing. And that's what a computer kind of is to you, what it represents, then the way that the Mac does things can feel foreign and odd and different and not right. So you have these two different groups of users, and sometimes it has to do with age, sometimes not, that just use and interact with files and media and just do computing differently. And what things should be like really has a lot to do with the context of your personal history. Like, what are you used to, you know? And so when somebody says, well, I want the iPad to do X, Y, or Z, you have to step back and you have to be like, well, is that just because they're used to doing things a different way? Or is it because that's the way it should actually be for a device that's basically a big touch screen that is transformer like, that's sort of the Swiss Army knife? So you have to kind of go back to first principles versus what people are used to, if that makes sense. And I think that's the right way for the Apple team to think about how to implement features on the iPad Pro in the future. All right, that's it for today's video. Thanks for hanging out. I hope you enjoyed it. If you think of some other stuff, go ahead and leave them in the comments, because you can see I'm sort of lining things up so that when the next iPad Pro comes out, we're going to be well positioned here on this channel to go through, and we have like several benchmarks, and we've thought about things in different ways than other channels are, not just about specs, but the overall experience, so that when that new one lands, we're going to be ready to say, okay, we got what we wanted or we didn't, and just really hit the ground running. So subscribe if you're an iPad fan or a soon-to-be buyer and you want to join us here in this community. And also, I just want to say, don't forget about the course, Freeform Unleashed. I use it the most on the iPad and on the iPad Pro in particular, and I can't wait to share that with you. If you want to get 50% off on this amazing course, get the pre-sale price. That's linked up down below. Also, check out our wallpapers. Hypernova's been selling like crazy. We also have some freebies, so it's all linked up down below. I'll catch you in the next video. Later.